Dear colleagues, let me start today's round table. New challenges to forensic inquiry in modern technological world, which is being held within the framework of the third St. Petersburg Legal Forum in the new challenges to in the litigation arbitration practice module. But apart from our colleagues, we have a lot of our guests and a lot of friends here. So I would like to introduce people who will moderate our session. I would like to introduce the person who will moderate our session today. I am the director of the Russian Forensics Center. My name is Svetlana Svernova. And my deputy, Usov Alexander, will help me. He is a PhD and a professor who spent all his life working in the field of forensics. So before I give the floor to the first speaker, I would like to run by you our agenda for today. First of all, the speakers get up to 15 minutes, if nobody objects to that. And as far as the discussion is concerned, I think we'll allocate 10 minutes per discussion or 10 minutes per debate to hear everybody's opinion. Do you agree with that? Okay, fantastic. So we will work until 6 p.m. and I think we have to stay within this time frame. Thank you very much. So let's proceed. First of all, dear colleagues, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of the participants of our roundtable, to all of the outstanding practitioners and scientists who, despite being extremely busy, found a possibility to put their business on hold and come to St. Petersburg to participate in such a landmark event. I would like to point your attention to the fact that within the framework of St. Petersburg Legal Forum, forensics, the topic of forensics, for the first time, united all stakeholders in the discussion of all issues and problems in forensics. Therefore, I would like, from the first minutes of our roundtable, I would like to outline the key moments of the discussion that is ahead of us. So the starting topic of our session is talking about the main trends in forensic inquiry. And if we discuss the main trends, we would offer you to look at the current realities through the prism, which is three-sided. So on the one hand is the theory and the methodology, which represents the conceptual systems and the principles of judicial inquiry. The second prism is the technological side, which talks about the ways and the methods and instruments of information recovery in the sources of information submitted for forensics. And the third one is the legal and organizational side, which deals with cooperations of subjects in the structure and infrastructure of forensic inquiries. Therefore, the picture that we will paint here today will contain both positive and negative elements which characterize all of the outstanding issues of forensic inquiry, as well as all of the bottlenecks which still exist and which still pose a pressing topic for all of the scientific community. So I would like to give the floor to the senior scientist of the Russian government's Institute of the regional representative of the international identification in Russia and the Slavic countries, PhD in law, Mr. Khaziev. So I would like to tell you that Shamil, all of his life, he spent working in the field of forensic inquiry. He worked in the Russian Forensic Institute of the Soviet Union, and today he is the one who's moving our forensic science forward in this country. Dear colleagues, the modern world has changed drastically in the last couple of decades, and these decades, of course, could not just pass by the judiciary branch and by such an important aspect of this branch as forensic inquiry. So forensic inquiry issues have attracted a lot of attention from all parts of the society, including attention from this academic world, business, and politics. These issues were reflected in the state development progress for the judiciary. In this forensic inquiry, we can see a number of new trends which can result either in positive or negative outcomes. If we talk about positive outcomes, then we're talking about the rapid development, about new research methodology. We talk about the molecular and genetic identification of personality, criminological expertise. We can talk about improving informational support of forensic inquiry. We can talk about the regulation of forensic inquiry. We can talk about strengthening international partnership in forensics, as well as a growing role of sciences in the development of forensic inquiry. In 2009, the National Academy of Sciences in the USA prepared a report about the strengthening of forensic inquiry in the US. This report paved the way for active development of forensic inquiry all over the world. This report was also discussed here in Russian press. Some of the notions in this report seem extremely urgent, and they require further development, not just in the US, but in Russia as well. If we talk about the negative aspects, then we can talk about the lack of scientific evidence for both traditional and innovative forensic inquiries and related forensic mistakes. Then we can see a significant lag of development of computer forensics, especially when compared to new emerging crimes appearing. We can see that there is a lack of funding and a lack of scientific research in forensic inquiry, especially when it comes to environmental safety of forests and wild nature. It is also topical to maintain the independence of forensics analysts who work in labs and investigate crimes. So the discussion of these and other aspects of forensic inquiry in the modern world seem extremely urgent and topical for us. So in my brief speech, I would like to outline just some of the issues which seem extremely urgent within the framework of this forum. First of all, in the last decades, many forensic communities have been discussing scientific justification of forensic research, forensic analysis. The quality of forensic analysis should be improved. We need to introduce new classification and systematization. The topical issue for all forensic inquiry is to increase the reliability of research and to eliminate all of the mistakes. So different scientific research conducted in different countries shows that the mistakes result from not just the lack of methodology, but from a lot of psychological factors. Such psychological factors should be accounted for both in the development of forensic methodology and in the proceedings, in the forensic proceedings. Therefore, it is extremely urgent to provide closer cooperation between scientists and researchers from different countries in order to reveal such procedural, organizational shortcomings, in order to minimize mistakes in forensic inquiry. In the last decades, or the last decade has been characterized by an increased activity in the international scene by the international nature of crime, by the growth of population, by crime syndicates. All of this calls for acceptance of a lot of norms and regulations which would also regulate forensic inquiry. But first of all, this is bilateral or multilateral contracts providing support in criminal proceedings, the International Criminal Court and other courts. The need for special structures which coordinates forensic inquiry in the UN and in the EU Council. The developing countries are provided with the support in the development of their forensic bodies and criminology science bodies. Right now in the world, there's 81 unions, associations of forensic analysts, and it includes different academies as well. So the activity of forensics experts, of forensic analysts, facilitates facilitates the efficiency of the development of new methodologies, information exchange, as well as allows to attract different professionals from different countries. And we think that such associations of forensic experts will expand even further because we need to rapidly exchange the information. Today, the DNA identification is used in all developed countries. The new molecular technologies, the discovery of molecular technologies influenced previously used methodology for the evidentiary procedure. Right now, because of the DNA research, a lot of the sentences were reversed because they used to be based on mistaken forensic inquiry. But due to the new biological and judicial findings, the sentences were reversed mostly in the US and in the UK. In Russia last year, there was also a case when a sentence was reversed due to a second inquiry into the DNA evidence, which was done several years left to the cry. Therefore, the computerization of human activities was also developed very rapidly, which in turn spurred growth in IT programs and software and then other technical capabilities. The funding for IT programs and for the training of experts is unfortunately very lacking, and we think this is absolutely unacceptable. The spread of terrorism in the world calls for new research methodologies when it comes to terrorism. In order to fight terrorism, we use all types of forensic inquiry, starting from the ballistics, explosion, and linguistic inquiries, and even forensic psychological inquiries. Our success in the fight against terrorism calls for new innovative methodology for forensic inquiry. In order to eliminate the threat of terrorism, we developed the basis of nuclear inquiry, of nuclear expertise. We developed the new methods of reconstructions of terrorist activities, the so-called computer animation. So we also work on providing the chemical analysis, toxicology, and on providing toxicology safety of our experts. The world community is also really worried by the growth of crime in the sphere of fine arts, such as theft of art objects from different galleries. So we think that this calls for the development of new effective methodologies and for the establishment of government authorities that can provide such forensic inquiry using this methodology. So when we do forensic inquiry in this field, we have to contact different databases and we have to contact different experts. Therefore, the judiciary community strives to provide a database of objects that might be subjects of crime. These databases should be tied to the national databases, to be tied to different reference databases, and I think here the initiative should be with the experts themselves, as well as with the International Association of Experts in Forensics. And I think we've already started working on that in the UK. They've done quite a lot in this direction. At the same time, we can use a very significant experience that has been gathered by the international police in the European Union countries and in the CIS countries. When we talk about environmental safety of the humanity right now, we are also facing a significant threat here. Therefore, we need to prevent the crimes related to the environment, which would be impossible without proper forensic inquiry procedure. In order to provide safety of the woods and of the wild nature, we have to remember that this problem is extremely topical and very pressing for now. So right now we have to work on the preservation of wild nature, and we've attracted many forensic labs to work on this issue. In the Russian Federation, this lies with the laboratory of the environmental review of the Russian Judicial Review Center under the Russian Minister of Justice. So all of our experience shows that one of the reasons for the success of judicial hearings is the independence or the lack of bias of experts. That's why we had to work on new review methodologies and develop new technical capabilities. At the same time, there has been a lot of discussion about the feasibility of using forensic inquiry by the enforcing branch. This is solved on a different basis in different countries, and it has a lot of different solutions. On the one hand, sometimes the forensic branch is completely extracted from the judiciary branch, and there are independent expert societies that are set up, or they're brought under the regulation of the Office of the General Prosecutor. In Russia, we have forensic services that works in the Ministry for the Interior, in the Drug Trafficking Agency, in the Ministry of Justice, in the Healthcare Ministry, and the Defense Ministry. These bodies investigate different crimes, and I think time will tell which one of the systems is more viable. And I think that concludes my speech for today. I've only managed to cover a few issues which I would like to discuss during the forum today, and I do hope that everybody present will share their opinions about the topical issues and questions in the modern forensic inquiry. Thank you very much. I think that everybody who is present, Hamil, people from your speech, people might gather that if we talk about outstanding issues, or if we talk about the issues that should be solved on a day-to-day basis, people might think that there are more issues than achievements in forensic inquiry. That's why I would like to tell everybody who's present here, I would like to say that we've done a lot, but unfortunately, due to the fact that the world is changing both structurally and quantitatively, the crime world, then it in turn means that our solutions, our research in terms of methodology, and our actions when it comes to forensic inquiry should, of course, correspond to the challenges that we face every day. They should be adequate. So please, if you have a question, please introduce yourself. And sorry if there is no microphone, I can't hear what they're saying. In your report, you talked about the psychological well-being of an expert during a forensic inquiry. Could you please tell me in which cases the psychological factor is important, or how does it, in which cases does it influence the opinion, the professional opinion of a forensic scientist? And if it does, maybe it is feasible to change the forensic sciences and to shift it under the responsibility of a committee or a team of colleagues. Thank you very much for the questions. When I was talking about the psychological factors, I was talking about the description of a case in forensic inquiry. But talking about professional opinion, I think that forensic professional opinion, I think what can be influenced here is the importance of the case, the personal wish to find a terrorist. I think this is not a psychological state or well-being of a professional, but I think this is an influence of several psychological factors. And I think we've already discovered more than 100 of such factors which might influence the opinion of a professional. So I think...
Are you happy? Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Yes, please. This is not about any issues, but Shamil no doubt tried to address this to encompass the impossible. However, the areas he indicated are most relevant now. So maybe those present here have anything else to add. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself. And please speak into the mic. Forensics Center, Tatarstan, Professor Beshmanov. What Alexander has said, I'd like to comment on that with my perspective. He's right when he talks about subjective reasons for forensic errors and judicial errors. However, it is important to talk about this here and now. I mean, what's important to talk about is the forensic ethics. The reason why I'm raising this is that recently the integration of criminal phenomena across the world have forced us to interact closely with each other. And it's probably important for a knowledge institute to play its role. Unfortunately, last year there was this incident in Kazakhstan when Russian experts, and by the way, they were from St. Petersburg, did not act in a very ethical way. They posted some unpleasant things on their website about Kazakh forensics, so we had to have a series of explanations. So maybe we should initiate in this forum some kind of a document to adopt as a basis for the discussion of forensic ethics, particularly as we have Dr. Professor Anomalia with us here today, who is probably one of the authors of this academic area. And then we could talk with Mr. Konovalov, the Justice Minister. He, interestingly, it's not probably a merit of the ministry, but it is the managers who stand behind this good cooperation that we have now. We have some good platform, the East-West platform, thanks to Mr. Yusov, who managed to arrange this platform. Last year we set up the Eurasian Academy of Forensics in Istanbul, Turkey, with some 60 countries from all over the world being part of it. And Lukin said, president of the Academy, sent his regards. I am vice president, and would like to underscore once again that our relations between Kazakhstan and Russia will never be subject to such attacks on the part of some experts, private forensic experts, and it will probably be reasonable to discuss what I've outlined. Thank you very much, Mr. Beshlanov. Let me just explain it for those present here. This attack that Mr. Beshlanov mentioned was from a private expert that used to work in the Interior Ministry, then in the Justice Ministry. This has nothing to do with state experts, because we are guided with a code of ethics, and when a new law is adopted about forensic institutions, which will require us to act correctly, both governmental and non-governmental experts, these issues will be resolved. Thank you very much. Unless if there's no more comments, okay. Armenian Institute Director. Mr. Zhivudyan. I think that was an interesting and important presentation. I'd like to talk about trends in forensic trends, and 2 points. One, informational support of judicial activities. Mr. Khaziev touched upon that. Let me inform you that last year we've had an international conference in Armenia devoted to judicial databases. Quite a few representatives attended. Professor Svetlana Smirnova made a presentation, and the outcome of the conference was this. I believe nobody doubts the relevance of judicial databases, but however important they are for judicial and forensic activities, they're separated. The police has their own database, courts have their database, other agencies have their databases, and they're not interconnected because they follow different entry rules, input and output rules. The search functionality is different. Interpol has databases used by many countries, members of this police organization, but that is a limited database. It's just for fingerprints, DNA, and things like that. But if you look at it this way, we view databases more broadly, both theoretically and practically. The theoretical part is also part of the database, like World Arms, and then some specific aspects, like specific arms in specific cases. So what's proposed? There are 4 ways that exist in a world the first one is for the government fully controlling their national databases, and indirect input is used for data exchange in response to relevant requests. Second way is for the government to maintain full control, but allows other countries to have direct access for data search. Number 3 is full control, but help establish centralized indexing for search purposes, and this can be achieved by human contact. Officers responsible for communications can do that. And number 4 is when databases are amalgamated to set up a centralized database. There is similar experience in Europe, where they have many central databases, like the European collection of car paints and car glasses. We should probably make up our minds and continue on what was discussed in that international conference, attended by Interpol, by the way, and establish some criteria for the databases to be compatible. And then, based on legal agreements, we could use those databases. That's number 1. And number 2, my second point, but to finish with my first point, this is all in line with the strategy of the document approved by the European Commission with respect to a unified forensic space in Europe to be established up until 2020, which mentions databases, among other things, unification, harmonization of acceptable means for the establishment, maintenance of forensic databases, and this is also true for NFSCI members. And then forensic evidence. I attended one of the sections this morning. There were interesting presentations made there about the acceptance of evidence by courts, by overseas courts. This could be used as one method of providing proof. So this was mentioned just as one method of proof, but since this is a very substantial proof, then they mentioned digital evidence as well. So there was this question about too much time being spent by international courts to collect evidence and proof with electronic media, which may take years. But then the idea is to optimize this evidence to make it easier to study it later because of its importance and relevance. So it would be nice for our speakers today to discuss this as well. The acceptance by overseas courts of such evidence. Yes, thank you very much. We will talk about that, but a little later. So I thank all of those who've spoken. But since we have running out of time, let's move on to our next item. And what's important here is whether this next item should be viewed as a limited issue, or it should be considered in its totality. Because let me state from the outset that the first question here and the second possibility, the second tip, do have place, because in order to tackle forensic tasks, our governmental and non-governmental institutions must be accredited, that is, be enabled to address these, and number two, the experts should be competent in those subject matters where they operate. So these matters of accreditation and competence about what is key in the world today, even though this has always been important, even 100 years ago. I would now like to give the floor to the quality manager, Mr. Simon Iveson, the UK forensic regulator, who will tell us about the British approach. Thank you.
The forensic science regulator to speak today. He's unavailable, so he has sent me to field the topic. The UK has an independent forensic science regulator. He was appointed a number of years ago on the basis that we had a changing market, that more and more commercial influence was happening within provision, within our market, ultimately culminating in the forensic science service being removed from being the dominant player, and then ultimately ceasing to exist in any real form. There is a presentation though, hopefully. If there are flag, if any of them come up. No. Anyway, I shall carry on while we find the slides.
Все поправим.
The Forensic Science Regulator covers formally England and Wales. The UK actually has 3 jurisdictions. England and Wales, which is taken together as one entity, has the same law. Scotland, which has a different law, similar, still adversarial, but it is a different law. And Northern Ireland has, again, a different law. So we have 3 different jurisdictions. Law enforcement for each of those areas reports to different devolved governments, and the Home Office, which is from where I actually originally come from, covers the England and Wales, which is why the Forensic Science Regulator only actually formally covers that area. Now, the first logical start is the title I was given was Legal Basis for Quality Management in Forensic Science. It wasn't the title I'd have thought of. I'm a forensic scientist by background, rather than a quality manager. Having said that, I'm responsible for the production of the Forensic Science Regulator's Codes of Practice and Conduct, and I lead on quality matters for the regulator. So I'm well placed, but I normally prefer to present on more technical matters. Now, quality is a topic that almost everybody thinks they understand, but it's always worth defining. By quality, we tend to talk about fitness for purpose, and then we have to debate what that purpose is. Now, the purpose, I would see, is for the criminal justice system in its totality, for the courts. Fitness of purpose for forensic science must be for the courts, otherwise it's not forensic science. It might be science, but it isn't for the courts. Quality management is about managing to actually deliver that for the courts. Now, when we talk about the fitness for purpose, every different player within the chain of evidence all has a different need for that particular science. The investigator needs to get a quick result. The prosecutor needs to have it to be strong enough to pass an evidential test. And the courts ultimately need it to be reliable and safe to use. All have their slightly different meanings for fitness for purpose, but all are aligned to the ultimate goal. Now, ultimately, for it to enter court, there has to be an admissibility test. Now, we have 2 gatekeepers within our chain of evidence. We have prosecution and the judiciary. Prosecution, because we have a separate prosecution service, the Crown Prosecution Service. They were formed in the mid-1980s when it was decided by Royal Commission that for investigating officers to carry out all their investigation and then also to then make the decision that they had enough evidence to go to trial was a form of it was a psychological factor. They were already biased towards prosecuting, even if the evidence was slim. So by separating that off, it meant that there would be stronger levels of evidence, and an actual evidential test would be inserted at that point. And if it doesn't pass that test, then the prosecution will not proceed. The police either have to go back and find more evidence, strengthen the evidence they have, do other tests, order other work, but they cannot prosecute if it doesn't make that evidential test. The next gatekeeper is obviously the judge. The judge makes a decision on admissibility, but only if it's actually made it as far as being charged and put to them. Formally, there are no tests for the judiciary. They make a decision, they use case law, common law, whatever you want to call it, and what they know about the system. However, neither the Criminal Prosecution Service, which is made up of lawyers, barristers, or judges, are amateur scientists. They haven't come from a forensic science background. They do not understand the technical basis for much of our findings, and therefore aren't always best placed to actually apply such a test. In 2009, the Law Commission, an independent body who was set up to improve the law in the United Kingdom and certainly in England and Wales, came to the conclusion that a formal admissibility test should be created. They had some other suggestions, codifying all our case law, all our common law into one statutory instrument, so it's much clearer of what the actual requirements were for the courts. But they came to the conclusion that there was an absolute need for an admissibility test. They very much drew from the American experience, drawing from what's known as the Fry test and the Dobert tests, which are all about scientific probity and whether it's empirical tested, whether it's subjected to peer review, whether there's a known error rate, etc. You're probably familiar with those sort of tests. And drew upon that and suggested that we should have such a thing. In 2009, we were just starting to write our codes of practice. We were starting to formulate what our rules would be in the UK under the new forensic science regulator. So we were very keen to hear their comments, because we were also trying to pick up on some other case law that had come our way around the issue of validation. We had the Omar trial had fallen apart. It was a trial within Northern Ireland it was a terrorism trial, and there was an issue of low template DNA. The big issue came in was the science valid? It was a new technique. There were still many people who will say that low template DNA is a dangerous area. It's a science too far. But back when the Omar trial happened, which is in I think 2006, it was a very new science, and you could find a large amount of scientists who would say, well, they can't do it, so therefore it shouldn't be done. But was it validated? Was it a valid test? We carried out a review of the science of the low template DNA, and our independent review showed that actually it was. It could be safe. That wasn't the problem. It could be validated, and it had been validated in this case. But it wasn't clear to the court, which put doubt in people's minds. But it meant that we also had to find some way of bringing that recommendation that should be a formal validation that has been agreed for the UK, into some sort of quality manual. In this case, we chose to put it into our codes of practice. So we have stated how all our organisations must carry out a validation. So there will not be doubt again. If you have validated it, you will have all these particular features of your validation, and you'll be able to demonstrate it to the court, and these will all be disclosable. So we have put that requirement in. It's all about demonstrating fitness for purpose. It's all about demonstrating the quality that the courts require. Now, we didn't go quite as far as some of the Dobert requirements. We still have differences of opinion about whether you should only ever allow evidence into our courts that there is some doubt within the scientific community. Our belief generally is that if we do not allow the lone voice, as it were, to at least be heard in our courts, then we will never actually advance science at all. If we wait until everybody agrees, then we will only ever get the weakest science, or will always be behind everybody. That doesn't mean that necessarily the reverse is true. There are some areas that people call science where a large amount of people all violently agree with each other, but they're not necessarily robust sciences for the courts. Lord Justice Leveson has referred to this of the astrology the science of the star signs. Well, astrologists will all agree, but it isn't a science. The fact, or I wouldn't see it as a science. But there's a large body of people who will all stand up and say how amazing it is. There are other sciences. Homeopathy is slightly more controversial. The fact that someone calls it a science doesn't make it a science, and the fact they all agree with it. So, 2009, we were working on our codes of practice. We've gone through dry runs. It was published in 2011. And every time there has been a change, every time there's been case law issues, every time we've had a complaint that we've been dealt with, we have been able to incorporate it into our latest version of the codes of practice or into our appendices. It allows it to be very dynamic in correcting any faults that we see within the quality management within England and Wales and the wider United Kingdom. We also hear what happens in other jurisdictions. We read the US report with interest, and many of the features we were already working on, and we completely agreed with them. But within the codes of practice, we've also referenced and or incorporated other legal instruments. The criminal procedure rules is a set of rules which have been around for probably last 5-8 years maybe. Each year, it seems, a new version of those come out. It's a dynamic set of codes. It's required for everybody within the criminal courts to obey them. But it also means by having constant revisions that any problems can be fixed quickly. It's far quicker than actually having primary legislation, and it's a much quicker way of making sure that a case law is properly explained to all individuals. So we're very happy to draw heavily on other people's codes, and equally the Crown Prosecution Service, one of the gatekeepers, also is quite happy to use our controls as part of their evidential test. So they now specify all our requirements within their evidential test. So it's a two-way process. We also have, in 2009, we also found, as we were starting to write our codes of practice, there was the EU decision on DNA and on fingerprints for accreditation to a specific international standard. That was also the direction of travel that we had in mind. We wouldn't have necessarily chosen those dates, but those dates were given to us. So yes, we will put all our dates in line with those. That's fine. That works for us. It gives us an additional strength. So we do have some legal controls over quality management, but much of it is down to our codes of practice. We also have another, possibly because we have a commercial market, we also have a financial regulation control over the delivery of forensic science. Because our organisations have to supply the police have to buy it from suppliers. So they have a customer supplier relationship. So they can require certain standards to be applied for or be adhered to through contracts. So if you wish to supply DNA to a police force, if you want to supply crime scene kits to the police force, they will specify certain standards, and those standards can be altered, modified, improved as issues or technology dictates. So we have a large amount of semi-legal controls over our quality management system, but technically we don't actually have any actual legal control. All our controls are quasi-legal, with the possible exception of the EU decision. We have rules, we have codes of practice, but there are no specific penalties for not adhering to it, other than not winning a contract. So it's that level of regulation that we have actually tended to adopt. Now, The Law Commission obviously are still hoping to get a change to a law and codify our regulations. But as a general rule, unless there is a market failure within our system, we tend not to go straight for the legislative option. We tend to try and use our softer forms of regulation to develop a quality management system. I think I'm getting the nod, and I shall finish there.
Thank you very much, Salman, for your interesting speech. And вы молодец, не растерялись.
And it is really great. We know that unfortunately, the lack of technical means to provide support to your speech did not hinder you from delivering and talking about the legal novellas. Thank you very much. Any questions? Anybody wants to discuss this topic? Well, I would like to mention a couple of things. Simon, thank you very much for the presentation. Since quality management, the topic of quality management reflects the key topic, it reflects the level of technology that we are discussing at this roundtable today, and of course, the implementation of quality standards. Of course, it should involve all of the subjects. As you said, these would be the examiners, the scientists, the prosecutors, and the judges. And I think we can talk about it a little bit more within the next speech. The only thing that I'd like to say is that the quality standards implementation problem is related to the fact that forensic science, apart from quantitative analysis, uses a lot of qualitative analysis, which are not so heavily regulated by international quality standards such as IT25 and so on, that are being actively implemented in forensics all over the world. That's why I think that this period while these issues are being considered or translated into practice, I think it is related to the problem of adapting these approaches that are outlined in the standards, adapting them to our everyday practice. That's why, if anybody has any questions, please. Bishmanov, Kazakhstan. Simon, you talked about evidentiary procedures and admissibility. How would you outline it for the international practice in this field? What should be international practice?
If you can always totally generalize for international practice. However, when we have specific issues, we tend to put in specific tests. So, for instance, when we had the issue of DNA analysis, low template DNA, we produced what was known as a prosecutor's checklist, and that explained point by point for every person that was having to do the evidentiary test of what the issue was, because it wasn't all DNA, it wasn't all low template DNA, it was very specific. It was a very specific problem. Now, I see no reason why, as you know, these issues occur all across the world, whether it be on ballistics, whether it be on contract trace evidence, that I see no reason why you can't actually have a prosecutor's checklist or a sort of a judicial checklist, I suppose, to assist in that admissibility. But I'm not sure who would actually have to deliver that for the international forum. Obviously, for international exchange, then one can agree on your common standards between you. But for exchanging with everybody, I'm not sure what that test would be. But I see no reason why you couldn't have one.
Ответили на ваш вопрос? Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Could you please tell me what is the difference? Sorry. What is the difference, in your opinion, between admissibility of evidence and reliability of evidence? Or verifiability of evidence? As far as I understood, is that you're not talking about admissibility, but about the validation of evidence. That's why I was trying to see what, in your opinion, is such a significant difference between admissibility and verification of evidence or authenticity of evidence.
Okay. Well, the admissibility test is
Допустимость, испытание на допустимость доказательств. И тот, и другой, они, в принципе, затронут все вопросы, которые относятся к доказательствам. Вы, конечно, ожидаете, чтобы эти доказательства были надежными, но при этом эти доказательства должны также пройти испытания в научном сообществе. Я думаю, что мы на это надеемся. В любом случае, это достаточно такой узкий научный вопрос, который генерируется в рамках научного процесса. Это, конечно, точка зрения эксперта, поэтому...
Even though one would argue that, as far as the scientific community would be concerned, a formal scientific validation had not been completed. So a decision on whether it's reliable will then be for the court.
Ответили на ваш вопрос?
Did you get the answer to your question? Yes, thank you. We have one question. We also work a lot on this the problem that you reported on, and I think that you know about the admissibility of evidence which is based on different logarithms, which was developed in 1998. It was a whole logarithm-based system. So what is your attitude to this topic in terms of its use in the judiciary procedure?
The admissibility scale.
Algorithms, they are probabilistic. They come up with statistics. In some fields, we have embraced the creation of statistics, but our courts tend to find statistics in most of our fields inadmissible, because of the nature of the sciences and the nature of the databases they have that underlie such stats. They are problematic. We also have the other problem that some of these expert systems, as we usually call them, it's difficult to be able to verify them with humans. If you can't do it longhand, it's very difficult to explain what's happening in what we call the black box. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have a place, but do you know that what's actually coming out of it is science or almost like a computer opinion? What value did you give it?
Александр Иванович.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо большое. Еще
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry once again for this technical question. It's because we have presentations in the database, and well, sorry for the technical error we made. Well, let us move to our third topic today, and the venue of our session is symbolic as part of the legal Davos. Last year in St. Petersburg, we celebrated 100 years of forensics in Russia. In St. Petersburg on 28th June 1912, the first forensic cabinet was established, and the first forensic law was adopted for our experts. Dear colleagues, in all countries and legal systems, forensics emerged from the practical need for judicial process. And if the methodologies developed today are being developed as part of by the forensic judicial institutions, because physicians and mathematicians don't need them. You can be a great specialist in one area or another, but not be an expert, not being able to evaluate the signs that enable you to prove in a certain circumstance what's it talking about and what judicial process needs. That's why outside of court process there is no forensics. I believe that all those present here, none has questions about why forensic issues, including quality management, are being discussed at this forum. Because we depend on how admissible and honest and good they are. We are positioning forensics as a synthetic science based on a complex of humanitarian, social, medical engineering, and natural science knowledge. Let me stress again that the legal science is determined by the fact that the object and subject of the knowledge is in the area of law. Therefore, forensic evidence, forensics are chosen as the key vector for the practical harmonization of legal systems, international and regional legal ties, and everything around regional and international cooperation in the forensic area. I'd like to give the floor to the director of the Belgian Institute of Forensics of the National Criminalist and Criminology Institute, Dr. Ian de Kinder. He was president of the European Network of Judicial Institutions and the Russian Federal Center. The Northwestern Center were entitled to work as part of the NFC system under Ian de Kinder. So you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting for giving me the opportunity to talk here at the International Legal Forum, which is held this year in the wonderful city of St. Petersburg. However, I must admit, I have to disappoint them somehow, as I do not speak Russian, but I will try to give my presentation as good as I can in English. And I will talk to you about regional and international collaboration in the field of forensic experience, paying quite a lot of attention to the important issue of the training of the forensic experts. Because in my belief, the regional networks, they play a very, very important role in the exchange of information between the forensic experts. They provide a platform for exchanging information regarding casework, good laboratory practice, implementation of quality systems, databases, and even setting up common research projects. However, a lot of their activities focus on exchanging information gained in casework. Could I have a control of the PowerPoint, please? Yeah. Well, the importance of the regional and international cooperation is clear in the Resolution 1905, which was adopted by the United Nations Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice in its meeting in Vienna in 2010. And in this resolution, it calls upon the member states and international, regional and sub-regional organizations and bodies to contribute to international cooperation in the forensic field by encouraging and supporting forensic science institutions to actively participate in the networks as a means of developing sustainable forensic services worldwide, providing expertise where appropriate, for the development and maintenance of corporate networks among forensic science providers and experts, and exploring innovative ways to ensure a more effective exchange of forensic expertise and information worldwide, hereby guaranteeing the autonomy of national forensic laboratories and promoting their internal development and modernization, including education and training, in order to strengthen the technical competency. Secondly, it requests the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to continue their support on international cooperation in the forensic field, to promote and facilitate the establishment and/or the sustainability of regional forensic science associations and networks, and to that end, further explore areas of synergy between its traditional support for the work of drugs analysis laboratories and forensic institutions more generally. And in these presentations, I will briefly introduce you the existing networks in the world, with a focus on their topical working groups for the exchange of expertise and their education and training activities. And first of all, we have ISEF, which resembles the Spanish and Portuguese-speaking countries in Europe and Latin America. It has 32 members from 19 countries and 4 working groups: scene of crime, forensic genetics, ballistics, and drugs of abuse. In this case, it's also important to know that ISEF possesses an advisory committee which develops strategies and programs related to teaching and practicing. And they are providing master-level courses in Spain at the University of Alcalá and Mexico as part of their initiatives. The Forensic Network in Asia has 18 members, and it organizes an annual meeting and symposium for members with programming to include plenary lectures, scientific sessions, workshops, and laboratory tours. It has work groups in DNA, illicit drugs, toxicology, and trace evidence. In the US, you have the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors, composed out of 600 laboratory managers and supervisors, as well as lab directors. However, it does not possess any topical thematic forensic work groups, neither does it provide any training to the forensic experts. In Europe here, we have the European Network of Forensic Science Institutes, established in 1992 with the purpose of sharing knowledge, exchanging experience, and coming to a mutual agreements in the field of forensic science. MC has now 64 members out of 34 countries. It also has 17 working groups in different forensic disciplines, which meets either once or twice a year. A standing committee on education and training was established in 2011. And MC also organizes open triannual scientific meetings under the name European Academy of Forensic Science. And I dare to say that the meeting in Den Haag last year was a forensic highlight of the year. On the other side of the world, you have the senior managers of Australian and New Zealand forensic laboratories. Established in 1986, works closely with the National Institute of Forensic Science, and they rely on a number of topical, technical, scientific work groups, what they call the specialist advisory groups, representing field, laboratory, and medical sciences. And then the most recent organization that I know of is SARS, brings together a number of countries in the southern part of Africa. I'm not aware of any topical groups they have, but what I can say is that they have already established a training manual for the middle management of forensic laboratories, which underlies indeed the importance of education and training of the people working in this field. So these are the regional networks which all fill up what is called IFSA, the network of the networks. And I hope that later on Wim Neutenbon will have the opportunity to say a bit more about the activities of IFSA. Does it mean that these are all the existing regional networks? No, not at all. We just heard a couple of minutes ago about the Euro-Asia Academy in Forensic Science. I think they're all very valid initiatives which are currently going on. Now, these regional networks, they provide a platform for the exchange of information. And training of the forensic experts and acquiring experience from casework indeed is extremely important for the competency of the experts. And let us have a look at the different competencies that are required for the forensic experts. Well, despite the increasing number of university courses in forensic science, the training of experts has to be extended into depth of the forensic disciplines in which he is working in the laboratory. It's not sufficient to have a master's degree in forensic science or, as you see here, engineer degree at university and to start immediately as an expert tomorrow. You need to have education, and this indication is also underlined in quality systems. As mentioned before, quality has become more and more important in forensics. The international accepted standard ISO 17025 has a full section devoted to the need for training, the need of have a completely documented and formally proven system for training of all the people working in the laboratory. And if you look at that standard, I can cite from it, the laboratory management shall ensure the competence of all who operate specific equipment, perform tests and calibrations, evaluate results, and sign reports. Further on, the person responsible for the opinions and interpretations included in the test reports should, in addition to appropriate qualification, training, experience, and satisfactory knowledge of the test carried out, also have relevant knowledge of the technology used, have a knowledge of the general requirements expressed in the legislation and standards, as well as have an understanding of the significance of deviations found with regard to the normal use of items, materials, projects concerned. And this competency has to be demonstrated at all times. End of citation. You see, this is quite a severe requirement, which can be understood from the importance of the work which has been performed by forensic scientists. And from my experience, I can indeed say that the training of forensic experts takes a lot of money. It takes also 1 or 2 years in the laboratory before he can really operate as an expert. Do we have now a model to test this competence? Yes, I think so. We can separate out a number of different factors. First of all, there's a general knowledge about forensics. And here MC will be assisting the lab directors as currently a general test in forensics is being developed with the financial aid of the European Commission in what is called the CAP project. And that test will provide a certificate delivered by either MC or the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. That last factor still has to be determined. Second, you need to have a knowledge of the forensic domain in which the person is working. There is a large number of forensic disciplines which will make this a very hard job to accomplish, but already the first steps are on the way with a couple of forensic disciplines. And third, how is that person behaving in the lab? Is he using the methods, the correct methods to obtain his results? Are his reports well written? This will have to be tested and demonstrated in a number of field tests. And in my laboratory, we have provided a framework with a number of tools, out of which each forensic discipline can pick out a number which suit them for their particular activities. And this is the way that I hope in the future we will be able to prove this competence. Now, going back to the regional networks, have a look at what is MC doing, what are the different working groups doing, and these are the activities for 2012. Which demonstrate the workshop and the training courses given by the different MC working groups. And as you can see, in 2012 has been quite a lot of activities, which is also associated with the European Academy of Forensic Science meeting in 2012. And some of these workshops are very general. Some of them are on really particular problems which are occurring in forensic science. Also for 2013, as you can see here, we have already a list of planned workshops. Now, this list was established in November 2012, which means that a number of specific items were not yet available, but you can already see that with topics like biometrics, hardware, hacking at the Dutch forensic laboratories, there are already a number of very specialized courses. I also would like to draw your attention to the workshop that the Fire and Explosions Work Group is teaching in 2013. That's a young scientist seminar, particularly designed for new people who are entering the field. So I hope that within my presentation, I made it clear that the regional network do provide support in our fight against crime. They do provide us support in exchanging experience from casework. And they also have a number of activities within education and training, which I think are very important for the future of forensic laboratories. Having said this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I leave the paper open for discussion.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ian. That was very interesting. Most importantly, we've all lived through all those stages. Well, questions to Ian. Do we have any questions? Yes, please. That was a very interesting presentation, an interesting topic. I'd like to ask Mr. Kinder. The European network, do they have a table or a governing document defining it clearly, the fit of your specialty to the basic education? Because there's no secret that many countries are oriented at this, because many different countries have different lists of subject matters, of disciplines, university disciplines. And we know ourselves that in Russia we have such tables, because you cannot jump from one subject matter to another, or at least those disciplines should be close to each other, like biotraces, then biochemistry. If it's toxicology, it should be about biology and chemistry. If it's computer science, then it should be everything around IT. So I'd like to ask you, are there any universal guidelines or tables or methodologies? If not, let this be a proposal from this section, if colleagues support, for us to work on this, because this needs to be harmonized somewhere. Thank you. Thank you very much. A very remarkable, very good proposal. Ian, please.
It does not have these lists available right now. It has set up a number of parameters indeed which are needed to demonstrate the competency of the different experts. Now, if I can speak from a Belgian perspective, I must say that the basic needs will have to be developed, I think, out of the different fields themselves. The question is, can you have somebody, for instance, who was trained as a toxicologist to work in the DNA laboratory? If you have to answer questions like this, that I think they need to have quite some of reflection, because basically I would say if you provide enough training, finally that person will get there. But the question is, how far do you would like to go with that basic training? Do you want to send him back to university to have a full education in biology? I don't think so, because that would be quite a waste of time, would also be quite a risk for the laboratory to undertake that action. So I think that within each laboratory, I think that you will have to try to match as well as possible the basic training of the people with the fields in which they are experts. Now, how far can you go with that? How much do you would like to invest into that is I think, part of the answer to your question.
I just just like to make a remark. Let me further clarify the question. You probably understood about that I was asking about hiring people. No, I'm not talking about hire. I'm talking about the basic education. Say, if we're talking about a spreadsheet of basic education, and we use this spreadsheet or guidelines to provide further specialization of experts, not even a specialization, but say to build on their qualifications. So we use something as a basis, and then within one specialization, we can build on it even further. You know, we can move along sub-specialization. So here I'm talking about the whole system of education. Of course, we cannot just hire somebody with a basic education. This was my question. Are there certain guidelines, certain spreadsheets? You mentioned Switzerland, for instance, and I know in Switzerland, Artaxes, I'm really sorry, you're always running ahead of us. We are going to discuss Switzerland. The next speaker will come from Lausanne. Thank you very much. Colleagues, well, the issue of education and training is very important. That's why it really stirred the audience. And why did it happen? Because, well, first in this field, we're talking about development of traditional projects. And I think that such educational projects are aiming to harmonize of domestic, well, Russian institutional and international institutional models when it comes to training on forensic scientists. And why it is really good that we're meeting together during this forum is that we have an opportunity to discuss different projects. For instance, we had a very important meeting today between the management of the Russian Forensic Center and the president of the Scientific Center of Moscow State University, Mr. Gasanov. And during that meeting, we discussed possible harmonization issues of such educational programs, because Russia has a very structured training that is done within the specialization of jurisprudence. And apart from that, we have separate judicial review. But the problems that we have to face with the basic data, the problems that we have to face with training of professionals who would be able to meet the demands of the judicial process and who would be able to meet the demand of the state-of-the-art judicial process. Well, that is why such a program or such a project will be definitely implemented and developed, and that's what we talked about today with the Moscow State University and Mr. Pierre Margot, who is head of the Institute of Criminology in a Swiss institute. And the programs that we looked at, these programs are very suitable to the situation or to the existing system in our country. That's why, Tamerlan, could you please tell us a little bit about your center? Could you please display the presentation on screen? Tamerlan, while you're getting ready, I want to talk about the importance of integration, the fact that we all come together, that we try and find solution to existing problems. So when we were talking about sending our students to Switzerland to study criminology, like I said, that Mr. Pierre Margot is the founder of the European Network of Forensic Scientists and the School of Criminology. And he sent me an email saying, Svetlana, I can talk to the Moscow University without you. No, I don't think so. So the Russian Federal Center should participate. Can you just imagine how fantastic it is? Thank you very much. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Tamerlan. I'm a lawyer by training. I finished Moscow State Judicial Academy. I have 5 years of experience working as a legal advisor, then as head of the legal department of a large Moscow automotive plant called Moskvich. Well, it used to be Opel, that became Moskvich. And although the quality of the car manufactured wasn't very high, the quality management was of very good standard. And I have a lot of experience, 1,500 cases in arbitration, and brought before the judge. It used to be the Soviet Union Council of Forensic Scientists where I worked, and today I see that we're going back to the basis, because when we were setting up our educational institution within the Moscow Lomonosov University, well, it is in fact a joint venture, but it was established in 1997 together with Moscow State University with their legal faculty. So Moscow State University was a legal entity then based on Russian law, and I was one of the founders, one of the managers of this educational institution. Sorry, I cannot. Okay, there you go. So I will not tell you about the whole center. It is very interesting. Right now we're implementing 8 programs, 8 key programs. This is the higher education, the full education, there is a gymnasium, and there is a lot of interdisciplinary programs which we implement both with the Moscow University and with other Russian, European, and American universities. I think that a key feature of our university is the fact that it is an innovative project. It is not a bureaucratic structure. We are program-based. We do not have faculties. We have programs. We have law program, economy program. We even have performance arts program. So all of these programs are based on languages. In our university, students study 3 languages: Russian, English, and French. Here on this slide, you can see the certificates which we give to our students and the diplomas. As you can see, you see the diploma issued by Moscow State University and issued by our university, and our diploma is based on different learning programs, as well as it includes Alliance Française certificates or International Legal English certificate. This is also a very high level. I can tell you that in the last 3 years, the whole of Switzerland, was able to support 3 graduates, and we were able to support 25 graduates. And they relocated their certification from Zurich to Geneva thanks to our graduates. So we provide very high-quality training. Here you also see World's Organization for Intellectual Property. There is also international nuclear law, and I can go on and on and on, but I'd like to stop and not tell you about all of the programs. The main thing is that we develop programs very fast together with our partners, and these programs are based on an interdisciplinary approach. We invite professionals from Russia, Europe, and the USA to implement these programs. And for instance, today, the work visas and the residency status that Geneva issues are comparable to the level of such high companies as Procter & Gamble. We have around 150 highly qualified teachers and academics who train our students. Last year, we started talking to an institute in Lausanne to develop our criminology department. Of course, one of the key areas is criminal law. That is why, upon the request from our partners from Moscow State University, we entered the negotiations, but then we realized that our main partners will be our colleagues who gave me the floor today, and we've already reconciled some parameters when it comes to the study plan. And I can add to it by saying that the world is developing very rapidly nowadays, and therefore we should not invent a bicycle, but we should implement interdisciplinary programs with the help of professionals from all over the world, utilizing an approved study plan, which is coordinated with Geneva and our partners. So I can tell you that our graduates already work from California to the Far East. We do not have so many graduates. We have about 100, but they all work in very famous international companies. Some of them are already CEOs or top managers of very large companies, such as Mercedes-Benz or JP Morgan or Lukoil, Gazprom. And such an educational model, which is program-based, gives us very good results. So today, I'm on the European partners. I can talk about the university in Lausanne and in Fribourg. And in America, there is a Washington Law School and West Virginia University. Thank you very much. I hope that everything that was discussed today will be able to implement. Thank you very much for your speech. Dear colleagues, we are very dynamic today, and I think that the most important thing is that we can clearly see the role of forensic science, and we can see how it is being revised, because the forensic science is pushing new frontiers, because without a forensic inquiry, we cannot solve any procedural issues, we cannot do sentencing, we cannot answer the questions which was the first and which came the second. And I think the main important thing is that unequivocally, in order for us to answer these questions and to harmonize everything within this trend, within forensic science, the most important thing is education. Because if we hire a PE teacher to do environmental review, then we wouldn't have a very good result. And today, this is precisely the picture that we see when we look at all of the commercial structures. That is why a lot of parameters within the law governing forensics, well, provided it is passed rather quickly in the Duma. But before somebody becomes a forensic scientist, such a person has to prove their competence. That's what all of our speakers emphasize today. And only after that they'll be included in the register of forensic scientists. But what we have today is that today judicial bodies give forensic inquiry to people who do not have professional competences to deliver results. So today we heard a lot on this topic, and I think this is due to the fact that it is one of the most pressing issues both in Europe and in the ex-USSR countries. That is why we included these issues into our agenda. In order for us to move to the next speaker, I will not give you any special introduction because all of the previous speakers already talked about this subject, well, maybe not in such detail. That is why now we are moving to digital evidence, national and international experience. So right now I'm giving the floor to the senior forensic scientist, chairman of the European Network of Forensic Science Institute, Forensic IT Working Group, to the chairman of the engineer section of the American Academy of Forensic Science, Mr. Zeno Gerrits.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here, and I'm very glad that I could make this. Could I have the remote control, please, for the slides? I don't know if the remote control is somewhere for the slides. Yes, I will talk about the digital evidence in the national and international experience from the Netherlands Forensic Institute. I will have a short introduction on the NFI, the Netherlands Forensic Institute, about the digital investigation, some about multimedia investigation and social network investigation. And then we'll go further into the international collaboration. So to emphasize that it's very necessary to have a good education, as the earlier speakers said, but also to share the information and some summary from that. So if we look into digital evidence, we see partly the biometric, the image analysis groups that are involved in digital evidence. And we see in our institute the digital technology group. We have around 60 people working on digital evidence in our institute. And it will vary on hardware analysis, so phone analysis, data interception analysis, cryptology, reverse engineering, because often we have to reverse engineer many protocols to find out what happens there, because manufacturers do not always tell how their products work. And lots of it is on research and development. So we do 40% of the time casework and 40% research and development. If we see the developments in the digital world, we see that everything is expanding very fast. So here you see some examples, what all can be done in 60 minutes. And this was a year ago, and now it might be twice as much. And it will double each year maybe, and that's something what we see in digital evidence. It goes in an exponential rate, it grows. So we see many emails that are sent out, all kinds of, like the Facebook messages, but also new social network media things are being developed. And we also see many smart devices, so mobile phones that are being developed and marketed further. So you have lots of information, and also lots of information which is valid for digital evidence, but you have to find it, because it's very much, and you have to extract it from these devices and from these different things. So we see many different things, like the chip cards, of course, that's mobile phones, they provide lots of information, but you have to extract this information in a forensic valid way. I mean, you should not alter the evidence, and there are some general rules around it, what you should do. So also within the EMFC, the European network, our forensic IT working group, where I'm chairman of, we have developed a good practice guide, and you can download it also from the internet. We see also many hard drives, many maybe damaged devices, like a hard drive that's damaged or that has been fallen in the water, and maybe you want to read that out. And often criminals are very aware that they have their mobile devices with them, so they try to destroy their evidence. So that's also something what we often have to do. We have to repair it and then extract the data from that. We see top three type of cases. That's child abuse cases, murder and fraud in the digital evidence arena. And we see many mobile phones, hard drives, and data analysis. So questions, what happened, and can you find some traces around it? We see some cybercrime cases, but not often police will ask us for investigation on those, because often the banks will do that themselves. But we see some more coming in, because you will see that there are many DDoS attacks, so the denial of service attacks on banks and that kind of thing. So we assume that there will be in near future there will be coming much more in. And we see also many of the cybersecurity issues around that. We focus on the data and the metadata and how to extract it and to do a forensic, a valid investigation on that. So here you see, because there are many commercial products where you can do this with, so the police will have many commercial products that they first investigate. If they cannot handle it, they will send it to our institute, or if the judge asks to verify an investigation of the police, we will also handle it. And we see the 4 steps like extract data, make the data readable, organize the data, and interpret the data. The interpretation of data, that's very important because you have to have several scenarios around that. Things we do is chip extraction. So if you have your mobile phone and it's fallen in the water, or a criminal damages his phone in a fire or something else, or if the phone is off and you want to extract all forensic data from it, we will extract the chips from the phone. And we also develop some tool for this to have all different chips that we can extract from phones, that we can read out the data, the raw data, in a forensic proper way. So that's one of the issues that we try to do. So no data is changed. But of course the chip is taken off, so of course you have to ask permission from the judge for this. Other things that we do is with the electron beam microscope, we might also look into the chips, so read out the memories of the chip itself on the chip level scale. And we might also alter some of the connections to break the security and to read out the chips. It's a very time-consuming thing because you first have to experiment that on other models, but it can be done. So we see many challenges in the forensic science, in the digital evidence arena. So we see that we need many libraries of tools, of memory devices, of phones. We'll have over maybe 6,000 different smartphones in our libraries to know how to read them out. And of course, not always will manufacturers give their protocols on how they implement it, so we do lots of reverse engineering. That's also true for malware, of course, because then you have to find out what really happened there. So this is something we try to do, some decryption, some interpretation of data. Of course, if you have a broken CD or something else, that's all that you should always find methods to restore the data as good as possible. We see many standard cases, so for the child pornography, where we will try to read out the data. We have also seen many child pornography case work. So in the Netherlands, we had a very big case with child pornography where there were more than 50 million images on that, and also the person made the images himself, part of them. So we had to analyze all this, and there we also developed our own software that the police could use to find more about the data, and that's the Giraffe software. Other things that we see, and I assume that many of you will use Gmail, Facebook, other kinds of cloud systems, so it's all virtual. I mean, often you don't know where your data is. It might be somewhere in the United States, it might be in Europe, it might be everywhere. But all things are virtualized. You can just set up your own computer somewhere in the United States without being there, and you can do all kinds of things. And that makes it also complicated, of course, for forensic science, because then you are in another country. And if we do it in the old-fashioned way for the forensic analysis, we should locate the data where it is. And that makes it quite difficult. So a new lawsuit should be implemented there to evaluate these kind of things. Other things that we see, that's location determination. Of course, if you have your mobile phone with you, you will connect to a nearby cell, and then the provider can knows approximately where you are, and also the police can use this data. And of course, if you have a GPS on your phone, we might also read out the data and the history of the data. And this is also, for forensic evidence, it might be of interest. GPS, also the car GPS, sometimes the history is still there, so we can also read out this kind of data, and that might also be useful for finding out what the route that the phone did. I mean, it does not say that the person did it, because the phone might be also stolen or something else has happened. That's also one of the issues. If you interpret digital data, the data is not self-explaining, so you should always be aware of the different scenarios, the different timeline analysis, but you have lots of data, so you can verify it also. And you also have to have some geographical models, so you can combine different forensic evidence traces also. And of course, with images, you can also do lots of investigations around that. We also have implemented a group in our institute on the intelligent data analysis. So they will do more the data mining approach and also the social network analysis. And of course, there you also need to have permission from the court to do this kind of examinations. We see many challenges. Access to the data is damaged, password protected, encrypted, deleted. So that's one of the challenges we see lots in forensic evidence. Many devices will have encryption on them, standard. The data is volatile. I mean, you will just communicate and you will delete it. You might, so there's some, you have to find out what happens if you turn a device off, if the data will be still there. And of course, people can also wipe their devices remotely. So you should be, if you investigate a mobile phone, you should take some precautions around that, there's no network connection. So we are also very much focused on chips and chip forensic and silicon forensics. We also have some open source tools. So in the past, we published some tools open source on the internet. You can just download them from SourceForge. So DFraser is for a forensic repair of broken videos. So if you have partly deleted forensic video frames, you can restore it. And most of the software is available online, so that also other people can verify that actually the things are forensically correct. So that's one of the things that we do. And we also have that for camera identification. If you have, if you make a photograph with your camera, there is a kind of a noise pattern in it, and then we can identify that a certain camera has made this image. So it is really a kind of fingerprint for that camera. And that's also something you can find online, peer and you compare. It's a very simple version, but it just demonstrates how it works. We have a better version for that for law enforcement available. But it works also good on the social network. So suppose someone uploads his photographs to YouTube or another Facebook, then we can identify later on that a certain camera has made these pictures, and that can be useful for child pornography case, but also for murder cases and other fraud cases that we handled in the past. This kind of research has to be validated in a good way, of course. So we did lots of validation, and also we published a lot on that, because that's important, of course, to have a good validation. And we see also many universities are working on this topic, so that's a very nice thing. So we have some challenges: who, what, when, and then where. I mean, often with digital evidence, it's international, so you will have to ask international court order for getting the evidence, and that might take a very long time. And combining evidence is also an issue. What kind of challenges do we see more? We see critical systems, of course, like a nuclear reactor. If there's something going on there, you cannot shut it down. Or if you have a large banking system, you cannot examine it in the old-fashioned way. So you should do a live investigation. Virtualization of the storage is one of those things. So the cloud systems, that's an issue. So it's shielding. People will shield their data. Criminals are very aware that their data might be used later on, so they will wipe it, or they will use strong encryption to have their data shielded. Other things that we see is increasing amounts of data, so the big data, it grows exponentially, so it will keep on growing, I suspect. Keeping up to date to the methods and the technology. We also see that we do not have enough people that are trained in this area, so because you need lots of people to investigate different protocols and things, and we see that often the university will not have enough people that are trained in this way. So we have to train them themselves, but in informatics it's not very many people are there, and the industry is also calling them, of course. And validation is a very strong thing that we look into, of course, in forensic science. So we should validate all of our methods. And the old-fashioned validation is not, I mean, it keeps moving. The rate of change is very fast. So if you try to validate the old-fashioned way with writing an article first that has been reviewed, then you are too late. So standards in works of operation and international guidelines. There's also an ISO standard created on this. More cooperation internationally. So we see also in our working group that we had meetings in Moscow and Riga and Rome and Linköping this year. So we try to find more of these challenges and to solve them. But then we need to collaborate. So that's something we try to do. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Зена, спасибо большое.
Thank you very much, Zena. I'd like to address the audience. You're not asking many questions. You're not very active. Let me give the floor to someone who has not spoken yet. Yes, please. Thank you. Kuzmin, Chief Expert, Prophylactics of Socially Dangerous Diseases. Now, Zena, my question is this. You mentioned very quickly international standards in digital evidence. And as you are perfectly aware, and you've shown that in your blog on your website, end of last year, ISO 27037 was issued about the storage of digital evidence. Any formal position of your working group, is it being prepared, or NFC on the whole, as regards this standard? What do you think about it? Have you been involved, or your working group, in the development of this standard? That's my question to you. And if I may, I would like also ask a question to our government experts here, present here, and the Russian Federal Center. This standard now published, well, of course we have Russian domestic standards in effect here. Is there any work being done to adapt the Russian standards to the 27037 standard? I can explain why, because the standard has not been published openly yet. It's not translated into Russian. However, if you look at the official web page of ISO, there's a translation which gives rise to quite a few questions. English says digital evidence, and the Russian says electronic proof, which is not the same thing. And there are other things also. So, Svetlana, maybe you will ask someone from competent people from the Federal Center to talk about that. But the first question was to you.
As a MFC working group, we have been involved in this standard. So we were asked for comments on this standard. We had more than 120 comments on this standard because we were not very satisfied with the basic of the standard. And I have to say, okay, it's not a standard, it's a guideline. So it's not a very strong standard, ISO standard yet. It's just an advice on what to do. It's not. They don't say you must do this, but they will just say, okay, you should do this. So people will read it differently. But that standard has been published. And they also took many of our comments. The standard came from Malaysia. They proposed it. The United States was not involved in the original proposal, so they proposed 4 new standards around digital evidence, and they are now being evaluated. So also as a forensic IT working group, we have them. We send them to the mailing list, and we would like to ask the people to give comments on those. But it's lots to read, so and it makes it quite. But we are working on evaluation, and I also invite you to read those standards and to give us some feedback for these standards before they get published. And it's very important to give feedback beforehand because we see some very bad standards otherwise being developed.
Спасибо большое. Сергей.
Thank you very much. Sergey, as regards the Russian side, would you like to hear an answer to your question right away? Well, Nikolai Kotovtsev is here with us today. He's the lab manager, technical forensic. Can you please say something in response? Nikolai Khotuntsev, lab manager, computer forensic reviews. Well, Zen has already said that that we were invited to give comments. Well, we've seen the standard. The translation is questionable. We will make every possible effort to adapt the standard to Russian, to the Russian specifics, and we'll be working on this. Thank you. I would like to add standardization and accreditation issues are associated with the implementation of standards. This is one of the key areas and is of interest to the Russian forensic center. Well, you know that the standard 52906 for laboratories is a Russian domestic interpretation of this international standard, and no doubt new standards appearing for forensic activities are in the center of our attention, and we will maintain contacts with the Russian Standards Committee, and I believe this work will continue into the future. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Anyone wishes to speak, or Zen has answered everything?
Zen, I have one more question. You noted that there is a growth of data which is submitted for research or for forensic analysis, and you said that year by year you get more and more devices, and therefore this information grows exponentially. So how do you approach the storage of such data? Because do you store such data while doing research, and do you store such data after you've completed your analysis? Because of course you require a lot of computer capacity to do so.
It's a very good question because we get more and more data. So it's now something like 10 terabytes per case that we get in. And in total, we had something like 300 cases. And they will mostly you will use the data for 6 months. So you will also have to back up the data, and that takes also lots of effort. So we have a large cloud system. Locally, so we have many. But if you look to the amount of storage racks, our building might collapse in a few years because it's too much space and too much. We don't have the space anymore to store all this data on the old-fashioned way. And you might go to cloud systems, but of course you will not do that with law enforcement data. Luckily, there is some development, of course, that storage also gets smaller. So I mean, it will somewhat, but still, it takes lots of time. And we hope there will also be a good solution for backing up the data. I saw we had some persons from Neil Johnson who has new research on storing it on DNA, and then you can store maybe 500,000 DVDs on 1 gram of DNA, and that will last for 10,000 years. So there might be some good solutions in the future, but it costs lots of money to invest and to do this in a proper way.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much, Zeno. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank Mr. Gerets to thank him for a very captivating speech, and I would like to thank you, Zena, because in 2010, when the European Forensic Network did a seminar, a workshop in Russia, I think that you really gave us such a fantastic incentive to develop our IT research and our forensic IT inquiries. Therefore, we are really thankful to you for sharing your experience, for sharing your best practices in this field. Thank you very much wholeheartedly from all forensic scientists. I was specifically asked to thank you publicly for that. It was when NFC was headed by Mr. Jan de Kinder. Thank you so much, Jan. You also participated. Dear colleagues, we have 1 hour left and we still have 2 speakers. Therefore, I would like to offer you an opportunity to think about the possible questions that you would like to ask. But right now, I want to give the floor to the advisor of the International Association of Platinum Group Metals, Mr. Harikov. Mr. Harikov will deliver his presentation. He will talk about a very interesting topic. He will talk about forensics in countering terrorism and transnational crime. In 2008, they finished research regarding the validation for Russian forensic science in terms of recovery of the environments in mining areas. So therefore, we work not only with the scientific community, but we work with people who are extremely practical. And I think this cooperation yields very good results. That's why, Nikolai, we would like you to tell us more about the work that you've done. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank you about the invitation to participate in such a wide panel discussion and in such a well-respected international forum. Thank you very much. Well, the topic of my speech is forensic maintenance activity to fight terrorism, international organized crime, and how Norilsk Nickel Security Service works in this field. Well, Norilsk Nickel is the largest nickel and palladium manufacturers in the world, as well as one of the largest manufacturers of copper, platinum, and other precious metals. Together with a South African together with the South African Republic, we provide about 95% of mining in terms of precious metals. So Norilsk Nickel has a very complicated and diversified production system, and at different stage of this production, the company encounters a lot of embezzlement when it comes to semi-finished products that contain semi-precious metals. Well, especially threatening to the economic security of the company are the products, are the byproducts of metallurgy. You can see they do not look very fetching, they just look like slag or earth, but it is in fact a concentrate of platinum, a platinum concentrate with platinum grade of 85%. So the criminal business was built around Norilsk Nickel in the end of the 1990s, and straight away it became organized and highly specialized. Some criminals specialize in stealing, using not so fastidious employees of the company. Other criminals specialize in storing small batches, in providing underground storage, in providing illegal storage for stolen goods, as well as providing armed guards who deny access even from the prosecutor's office. Well, the third thing is that criminal groups specialize in delivering of stolen goods across the border. They use falsified or fraudulent customs declarations which mask them as legal products. So these criminals transport the materials outside of Russia to the processing facilities in Western Europe. Therefore, part of the stolen goods that contain precious metals is within the illegal trade, illegal global trade, which in turn finances international criminal and terrorist groups. So what are the problems that we face here? First of all, that's you saw the people, you saw how it looks. The concentrate, it looks just like earth. Again, there is a possibility for declaring such products illegally. There are no reliable methods of control. So in order to solve this last problem, the employees of Norilsk Nickel, working together with the scientists from the Criminology Institute, developed a methodology for identification of mining products. This methodology combines analytical procedures as well as a reference system which contains databases of mining products. What is specific about this methodology is that provides identification not just for individual products, which is quite simple, but also provides the methodology to identify compounds, very complicated compounds. Because as a rule, such stolen goods, they are mixed products that were stolen from different locations, or sometimes they're purposefully mixed with different products in order to hinder identification. So this compound methodology includes a number of original analytical procedures which are protected by a patent. Unfortunately, I do not have much time today, so I cannot really tell you more about this methodology. But from the start, this methodology was created to conduct forensic inquiry for cases brought before the judge outside of Russia where these stolen goods are delivered. Therefore, we developed a program for the validation of this methodology with the support of NFC and with support of the Russian Federal Center for Forensic Science. We set up a collegial body for forensic science which included the representatives of major forensic bodies from Russia, USA, the Netherlands, South Africa, and so on. Here in this picture, you can see some of the members of this council. And some of the members of this council are present here. For instance, Dr. Roger Dixon and Dr. Usov. As a result of our work that was done during 2 years, we tested and demonstrated the possibilities of this methodology in the TNO laboratory in the Netherlands, Anglo Research, in the chemical laboratory of Norilsk Nickel, which is located in St. Petersburg, as well as in the laboratory for the Institute of Criminology in the Russian Security Bureau. As a result, we deciphered mixed test samples, and as a result, we published a validation report. This is the first page of this report that you can see on this slide, and the report in its entirety is published on the NFC website. On this slide, you can see the conclusions. And I think our main conclusion says that we find that the CIP is a comprehensive system of procedures that is well suited for the identification and source attribution of Russian PGE-bearing materials. At that time, that was the only methodology that underwent such a thorough and serious international validation procedure. Well, criminalistic analysis that was done using this methodology, such analysis provides a legislative base for criminal cases both in Russia and abroad. So starting from 2008, when Norilsk Nickel laboratory was set up in order to tackle these problems, until now, we've done more than 50 forensic reviews. And if you talk about the amount of stolen goods, then it exceeds 350 million rubles. In order to counter the illegal turnover of precious metals, we suggested a system of international control that brings together the efforts from all of the participants. This is a very simplified schematic, but it says that the raw material that is submitted to processing plants in Western Europe undergoes incoming inspection. During this incoming inspection, using special methodologies that I'll talk about on the next slides, we reveal the materials that might be stolen from Norilsk Nickel. Therefore, we sample such materials, we deliver these samples to Russia, where they're studied further using this complex methodology, and as a result, we can reveal the presence of such stolen materials. And then, depending on the situation, we can move to different procedural actions or bring a suit in front of the judge. So here you can see these PGE elements in different concentrations. So in order to counter illegal turnover of precious metals, we work very closely with the international PGE materials associations. This association includes several committees, including a security committee. And in April this year, during an annual session of the security committee, head of Norilsk Security Service was appointed as chairman of the security committee, and I'm his advisor. That gives us hope that the system that is being proposed will function at full speed, and we will use our cooperation to tackle this organized crime, and we will stop embezzlement and theft from our processing facility. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nikolai. Well, we all had an opportunity to see how the activization of potential and the use of different instruments attracts attention not only from us, the participants of the process, but also from the business community, both in our country and abroad. Do we have any questions for Nikolai? If we do, that would be great. Roger Dixon from South Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to add not a question, but a comment on this project that Nikolai has spoken of. When I first met delegates from Russia in 2003, there was very little communication between countries, between mining companies, and so on. And everybody worked in isolation, developing their own methods, which when they tried to apply in other countries, often didn't work, for the reason it was a different understanding, not different scientific principles. And subsequently, in the course of this CIP project, many unintended or beneficial results came from it, which was cooperation within South Africa between different mining companies who thought their own methods were trade secrets. Development of new techniques, and also understanding that what is required of a legal system in one country can be quite different in another country, but underlying all of that is the principles of sound science. If you have the sound science and you have a protocol, as Simon Iverson mentioned, you have a standard protocol that can be used internationally. It is of great benefit. So all I can say is, from the industry side, from the legal side and the forensic side, and also from the scientific side, because in answering the problems that come up, if in Russia you say, I know this material is mine because I'm an expert, will somebody in another country say, yes, but could it not come from somewhere else? And these concepts we have developed, and I think all in all, that project now, when it concluded in 2008, that was only the start. It's now going very well. As Nikolai said, in Vienna now, the resolution and so on. So thank you very much to the Russians for initiating the project. I think it's benefited everyone.
Спасибо вам большое за выступление.
Thank you very much for your speech. The work that you've done is fantastic, and you achieved significant results. Roger, I just want to thank you, because despite of everything, you flew from South Africa. This is so far away, so probably this is a great sign of solidarity and a sign of friendship which we developed as part of our scientific cooperation. And this project which we did was unique. And here we have to thank the management of ANSI, Mr. Neutzebum, who will be our next speaker. They facilitated the implementation of this project. But I think that the idea itself and the objective that we're trying to achieve over several years, and I think this project took 3 years, and I think we managed to find a solution. We managed to get very good results, but what's more important is that we set a precedent. we set a precedent for the validation of methodology, regardless of how complex it is. And I think that our experience will be very useful for everybody. It was also an impetus for the Russian Federal Center for the validation of different methodologies. So now it is becoming quite systemic, it is becoming quite comprehensive, and I think that the results are very obvious. Again, I would like to thank all of the participants in this project. And the fact that we got such terrific outcome I think this is the result of our close cooperation and of understanding that we managed to reach between the scientists, between the academics and business professionals. Thank you. Any more questions? Kuzmin from Moscow. Nikolai, I just wanted to ask you one question. Well, it's probably not even a question, but a suggestion or feedback. It is quite characteristic that the results of this work are being announced here today at the International Legal Forum, because when you delivered your presentation today, I think it was slide number 6, if I'm not mistaken, and you had a schematic there which illustrated sampling methodology, research in laboratory, and then there were some arrows pointing up. So what were they pointing to? Well, in my understanding, what is required is the development of international legal mechanisms that would allow us to tackle such situation. And this is not something that for the forensic science, but this is something for other branches of the law. So, Noris Kninkel, are you going to ask these questions at the next year's legal forum, maybe at different roundtables? What do you think?
Well, this is a really tricky question. Well, what this slide shows is an idealistic model. It only works on a bilateral basis in agreement between Norilsk Nickel and other processing and producing companies. We would, of course, like it to work to the full extent. That's why we place our hopes to the Security Committee. And hopefully we will bring together other countries, but the challenge is that this system touches their commercial interests, and this control system kind of impedes their business projects. When it comes down to money, then reluctance becomes the rule of the game. So I hope that in the next St. Pete Forum, I will be able to report on more optimistic results. Thank you. Dear colleagues, now getting closer to the end of this session, I'd like to emphasize that in order for us, the expert community, the judicial community, investigation community, law enforcement community, in order for us not to be always in the state of work in progress, but to reach a result, we need cooperation. And the cooperation in these three areas, methodology, legal, and practical, will generate a result. And then the judge will know what forensics can give, and the forensics and practitioners will know what we can indeed do and what we can require from the investigation authorities. Such positive such positive cooperation in support of it, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Wim Neutenboom, who is senior manager for projects in the Dutch Forensic Institute. He's associated with the dynamic development of the European network of forensic institutes. This deserves an applause. Okay, Wim, you have the floor.
In the first place, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here, especially Svetlana and Alexander. Today I will go into models for structuring forensic science on various levels, local, national and international, and I will finish my presentation with some conclusions. These are the contents of my presentation. You can read it for yourself, of course. So let's start with forensic science structure in Europe, and I would like to start with some figures. Of course, I'm aware that Europe is not identical with ENSI, the European Network of Forensic Science Institute, but because I was secretary for over 10 years, I am most familiar with ENSI. ENSI today, we have now 63 member states as a member, and we are present in 36 countries. And altogether, we speak 25 languages within ENSI. So we face a little bit communication problem. Fortunately, today, almost everybody can speak English in an understandable way. If we look at the number of forensic scientists, it's my personal estimation, and I mean by scientists reporting officers plus the investigator in the laboratories, and I make an estimation for about 95 per laboratory. We have totally in Europe 6,000 forensic experts. Within the ENSI community, we have made a structure for the forensic disciplines, and we have come to 17. You can find all the details on the ENSI website. And of course, we can split this up in a lot more sub-fields of forensic science. If we divide the number of 6,000 experts by the number of expertise field, then you can see that we have 350 experts per expertise field. That means per country 10. So my conclusion is that the forensic science community on the level of experts is very small. Moreover, if you realize that the number of, for instance, DNA experts is much more higher than the number of experts for, say, paint or glass. Having a small community underlines, in my view, that there's a need for communication because you need colleague experts. Let's have a look now at forensic institutes in Europe. There are many features to characterize the forensic institutes in Europe. First, you can check, is it a part of the government or is it in the private sector? Except for England and Wales, which have only private sector, sometimes called commercial laboratories, the rest we face governmental laboratories. But sometimes there is something in between. Like in the Netherlands, we have a mixture and we have the option to charge clients outside the police or law enforcement agencies. And these developments are interesting for you to monitor in future. Another characteristic, is it a broad laboratory, broad scale, with including all disciplines, or is it just focusing on one or two techniques or disciplines? You can see, for instance, laboratories which are only performing DNA profiling or just focusing on explosives. Sometimes you can find in one country more than one laboratory, of course, and then the question can be, are they all at the same managerial level, or is there a kind of hierarchy in the structure? Is the governmental laboratory part of the Ministry of Justice or part of the Ministry of Home Affairs? You have examples of both. And sometimes it is articulated that being a part of the Ministry of Justice gives a better position in terms of objectivity and impartiality, but I'm not sure about that. Is the laboratory working on innovation? Is it performing research and development in a structured way? Are there any activities on education and training? And not only for their own incoming scientists, but also for instance, crime scene officers, or are the employees of the Institute teachers at the National Police Academy? We can continue with more features. What is the relation with the scene of crime units of the police? In some countries, the CSI units only collect evidence and send it to the forensic laboratory right away. In other countries, you can see that CSI units themselves have small laboratories and do some investigations. What about the contact with end users, being the prosecutors or judges? Having contacts with prosecutors can be useful in order to reduce the number of submitted test items. You can agree on that. It can also be useful to check if your reports are understood and not misinterpreted. However, too much contact is a threat for maintaining an independent position, so be careful on that. In many European countries, the forensic medical community is apart from the general, so to speak, forensic community. The medical practitioners and pathologists have their own institutes, and sometimes it looks like, at least in Europe, that we have two different forensic worlds. Contacts with other players in the forensic arena. You see some examples: universities, private experts, or intelligence services. And especially contacts with universities can be very useful for innovation and also to keep science within the forensic community. Another feature, if you look at the countries, in a lot of countries you see that there's only one governmental forensic institute. Some examples: the Netherlands, Belgium, Finland, the Belgian countries. And there is some danger in it, I think. Lack of competition may invite you to lay back. The second model you can see is that you have in the country two governmental institutes. One is part of the Ministry of Justice, the other is part of the Ministry of Home Affairs. And you can see it in countries like France, Italy, but also Latvia, Lithuania. And this is based on a long history. Sometimes it's called a gendarmerie laboratory. And finally, of course, you have countries with more than two forensic institutes, and the institutes are spread over the country And of course, the reason can be that it's a big country or there are more than one languages in the country. So far I have, next question is there an ideal, a best structure for national forensic science? Sorry. I think probably not, because there are too many differences, and here I give you a summing up of what can be different in a country and what can be reason how to structure forensic science. And you have seen most of them before in my previous slides. Next question is there something like an ideal model for a forensic institute? Does something like that exist? I think again, probably not, but there's a lot of consensus about how an ideal institute should look like. By the way, I've never seen a really ideal institute, but let's try what should be in it. I think competent employees, validation of method and analysis, a robust management structure, and of course equipment. And you see these four are the main elements of any quality assurance system. Of course, if you get an accreditation based on an international recognized standard like ISO 17025, that would be very good for the institute. You should have an open eye as well as resources for innovation. You should have an acceptable workload. There should be a good balance between the capacity of your institute and the submitted caseload. And I think you should be in contact with other players in the field, like the end users, police, prosecutors, but also with other institutes in your own country and abroad. Let's have now a look at international landscape. And as already told you by my friend Jan de Kinder, you see now almost in every continent a network. I believe that the ESCLED network in the United States is the eldest one. But in later years, and especially in the last 5 years, we see more and more networks in the continents. All networks have their own websites, and if you're interested to know more details, I recommend you to visit their websites. They are very easily to Google. Also mentioned by Jan de Kinder was IFSA, the International Forensic Strategic Alliance, also called the Network of Networks. Usually the chairs of the networks meet each other once a year at a meeting in conjunction with an international conference. What are the aims of the networks? I think in essence the networks have the same aims, although they use different words. And the aims of IFSA is to be the sole voice to the international community and organizations like Interpol, United Nations, etc. Especially to focus on global topics and strategic topics. But frankly speaking, until now, this has not been very impressive. Most of the time is spent on talking about operational issues. But maybe we need much more time to be a serious global player representing the global forensic community. Some options for international cooperation. Of course, exchange of scientific expertise, skills and knowledge. It will promote better scientists and better institutes. We can learn from each other. Another option is a joint research project. It will bring together complementary knowledge. It can be it has some economical benefits. We have shared costs. It avoids duplication of work, and it gives you a better position to get international funding. The creation of centers of excellence. This can be very highly specialized and advanced institutes for innovations, but it can also be a backup for regular casework. Efficient use of capacity in casework, and that can apply for equipment as well as for people. And one important condition, of course, is that we have trust in each other's level of competence. And being accredited is, of course, an excellent tool for that. We still face the problem of having good programs for proficiency tests and collaborative exercises. And international cooperation can be a solution for that. International forensic investigation teams for major events, say for a terrorist attack or a disaster like a tsunami, and we can cooperate in, for instance, the identification of victims. If you remember the tsunami in Asia some years ago, you remember that there has to be identified over 200,000 victims, and it is a huge amount of work. And finally, databases. And if we consider the impressive results of the DNA databases, I don't have to say anything more on this. My conclusions. First one is, first improve your own situation and level. You don't need anybody else in first instance to start with that. Then I think forensic scientists, but also forensic managers, should have contacts with colleagues in their own country, but also abroad. And finally, forensic... Too far. Yes, I can read it now myself. Forensic Institute should create forensic networks for various ways of cooperation. To conclude, we have already observed that the forensic community is a small one, especially on the level of experts. So you need colleagues to exchange knowledge, skills and experiences in order to function in an optimal way. But I repeat, it's not only for scientific reasons, it's also beneficial for managers in terms of process management of an institute. We have some specialties in the forensic community, or you could call it challenges, for instance, contamination, education, training and quality assurance, which may be very specific for the forensic laboratories. So the conclusion is that network in the forensic community has advantages for scientists as well as managers. International networks and structures do not fall down from heaven spontaneously. So please take initiative and try to reduce, and if needed, try to reduce your cost for traveling, etc., by using modern digital communication channels. I thank you for your attention.
Большое спасибо, Вим.
Thank you very much, Wim, for a very interesting and spectacular speech. Any questions? Sorry, I cannot really hear the question. Could you please speak into a microphone? Regarding the first situation, which you said that we have to, one of your slides that you said that the forensic institutes, domestic forensic institutes should cooperate. So if we talk about the relations of forensic institutes, do you think that an investigator has who ordered the forensic inquiry, does such an investigator have a right to be present during a forensic inquiry? You see, if I'm a forensic scientist and I'm providing my expertise, an investigator comes and attends my procedure. How would you treat this situation? What is your opinion about it? I'm talking about the cooperation procedure of different procedural subjects. For instance, we have an investigator and we have a forensic scientist. Do you have such problems, Wim? That sometimes you carry out your scientific investigation inquiry together with an investigator.
Do you mean the cooperation between a senior crime officer and a forensic scientist in the laboratory?
No, not quite. For instance, we have a crime and an investigator collected some data. He brings it to an institute, to a laboratory, gives it to a forensic scientist, gives a forensic scientist a document so that I can make a scientific inquiry, and then an investigator or investigative officer tells me that I have a right to be present during your process while you're running your forensic inquiry. Have you ever encountered such a situation? Because it is very commonplace in Russia. That's why I'm asking about your attitude. No, Nadezhda, I don't think they ever have such situation. I think everything is very incognito over there. And I don't think they even know the district where the data or where the evidence come from. They don't even know the part of the country it comes from.
It sounds almost like you need an eyewitness while you're doing your investigation at the institute.
No, okay. I see that my question is irrelevant. I see
To that, I think in Dutch law, but it's very unusual, that I think the suspect has the right to attend the investigation at the institute.
Спасибо большое, Вим.
Thank you very much, Wim. Dear colleagues, do you want to ask a question, Natalia? I think we were about to summarize. So, TV channel from Moscow, my question is, do European courts have procedural equality? Because, and my question is to Svetlana, how do you evaluate the situation, the same situation in Russia? What is it like in Russia? I can give you more detail. What I'm talking about, that in Russian courts, it is quite often that forensic analysis that is for the benefit of the defendant, well, sometimes it is not taken into account at all. So does Europe have any sort of procedural norms that allow us to avoid this? Still, in
my view, the aim of forensic science is the truth finding. A forensic scientist is not there to punish people, it's to submit evidence
sure.
and find the
But-
truth.
Да, но если хорошо.
Yes, I understood you. Then I have a question to Svetlana. How would you evaluate it? Let me give you an answer, but I think that Jan would like to remark on that.
There's a document from the Council of Europe stating that there should be equality of arms. And I think that that's also a document which stretches not only over the European community, but over the whole region which is covered by the Council of Europe. The equality of arms regarding to forensic, more particular.
Вы задали очень
You asked a question which is on everybody's mind. That's why I think that everybody is participating in answering. I think here we have all of the prominent managers of forensic bodies, not only in Russia but from abroad. Let me just summarize. Let Kazakhstan speak. Let them share their experience, because I think that is quite often that I would like to remark and also to answer your question. I would like to say that when you say whether there is an ideal structure for a forensic inquiry institute, you said it's not probable, but you at the same time you named several aspects, and by providing an answer to the question, I would like to say that there is one necessary aspect which can provide sufficient conditions, that is that the forensic science should be independent from the judiciary. You said that in several countries you have it in the Ministry of Justice, in the police and the gendarmerie, you have the forensic branch. But if this structure is independent from the authorities who order this inquiry, I think that would be a very interesting point on which we can base a very good structure. So in this regard, I would like to tell that's what we have in Kazakhstan. We have a unified forensic center, which is independent from the criminal prosecution branch, which provides us with objectivity.
Read the ISO 17025, there's some rule that there must not be any pressure on the investigator. The pressure can mean pressure in time, but also pressure for the kind of conclusions he is supposed to formulate.
Да, хорошо. Я могу отвечать вам, да, на вопрос? Вы знаете,
So to answer your question, I think that I heard it slightly differently. I think what you're trying to ask is whether we can compete in courts using conclusions from European forensic scientists and our scientists. No, that wasn't my question. No, my question is more down to earth. So, for instance, when we have a forensic scientist and he comes to court, and this is a forensic scientist that participated in the investigation, that it is quite often that the result of forensic inquiry is doubted by the defense. But at the same time, the forensic analysis that is submitted by the defense is not taken account by the court. Well, first of all, the court should evaluate the result according to the procedure. According to the procedure, they should evaluate the results of forensic discovery done by both parties. So the court cannot just reject one result and evaluate another. If they do so, then they violate the procedure. But today, I agree with you. You're an attorney, you're a journalist, so you know what's really happening. And so today we have this abracadabra. That's what you can encounter at all steps of the process. So today in the investigational committee we have a forensic service, so a person who takes evidence, studies the evidence. I think that they might be able to do it in a preliminary preparation before the lawsuit, but it is a procedural violation to do it once the lawsuit is initiated. Have I answered your question? Yes, in general, yes, you did. But what are you doing in order to turn the situation around? Well, unfortunately, we cannot do much. we're very nervous and passionate about it. I'm sorry, I cannot hear the question.
Судить, да. Да.
Микрофон передайте, пожалуйста.
Да.
Dear colleagues, let us summarize. I would like to thank everybody for very interesting speeches. Natalia, I hope you do not mind if you don't give you the floor, because in today's session, in today's discussion, we did not cover one thing. We did not cover the work of the Commission of the Council of Ministers responsible for forensic science, but due to the fact that we have such a representative and prominent membership present here, I would like to invite the chairman of this commission, because yesterday it was voiced by the Minister of Kazakhstan and the Minister of Russia during the plenary session. So please, just a couple of words, very briefly, and we conclude today's session. So Alexander Kadyshev, head of the Forensic Sciences Institute of Belarus. He's the chairman of the Council of Ministers Commission. Well, today we've touched upon this topic, so I would like to inform everybody very briefly on the changes that the forensic system of Belarus is undergoing. So my colleague from Kazakhstan, as well as Svetlana, were very passionate by saying that the forensic bodies are tied to investigational bodies, they report to the same managers, and I think this is unacceptable. So with us, the issue about creating a uniformed forensic body that came into light straight after the formation of the Republic of Belarus. First of all, we wanted to transfer these rights, the forensic rights, to the Ministry of Justice, but it did not happen in the last 10 years. First of all, because there were no economic incentives. It is very costly to set up such a service. You have to, find a building, train the people, give them good salaries in order for the whole system to work. But in the end of last year, prompted by the initiative from the investigational committee, this topic was brought into light again and was discussed rather seriously. First of all, the aspects of creating such a unified forensic service were discussed at the Presidential Council for the Legal Reform. This council has very prominent membership, and the council ruled that the existing of such services in investigational bodies or in prosecution bodies is not a correct way to proceed, and we have to set up a unified forensic service which would not report to a single judicial body. After that, we created an intergovernment team, which I was a member of. After that, we introduced our suggestions to the president, and we offered several options. The president agreed and allocated 2 months for us to develop the decree. The team was headed by Vice Prime Minister, and on the 22nd of April, everybody remembers, it was birthday of Lenin. So on the 22nd of April, we signed a decree to set up a public committee on forensic science, or forensic inquiry. This forensic inquiry committee includes all of the scientists from the Ministry of Emergency, the Ministry of Justice, and so on. And I don't think that a single public authority has such a prominent membership. So this committee was giving all of the functions that were previously carried on by all of these different fragmented services. So if in Kazakhstan they're only doing the inquiries, but when it comes to databases and so on, that is all done in the Ministry for the Internal Affairs. But we in Belarus, we transferred everything to this body, including medical forensics. The decree is number is 202, dates it's April 22nd. You can familiarize yourself with it. There are a lot of committees and there's a lot of functions that were given to this body, including medical forensics, from organ transplants, forensic psychiatry. Everything is encompassed by a single body, and I think the structure of this committee is, well, first of all, the criminology, then engineering, expertise, financial, economic, forensic accounting, and the managerial body. So our center also reports to this committee, and our center is the only enterprise in Belarus which is accredited as a scientific or research body. First of all, we're a legal entity, but we also report to the committee. The committee was also transferred the rights for further training for medical forensic specialists. And this body will provide training to all of the forensic scientists. Then we also transferred to the budget of this body you know that in this body we have to concentrate the inquiries which are being done on requests from individuals and corporations.
Another question. Our Armenian colleague asked the question about whether we have this table. Well, we have such a table for non-governmental experts because this is an activity subject to licensing, and non-governmental experts first need to be certified and then licensed as individuals and as individual entrepreneurs, and they need to be trained in our center. They pass tests, take tests, and things like that. So we developed this table with basic disciplines, subject matters. I approved that because there's nothing else. And if we believe that this is not that the education of an individual is not in line with the basic education, then we believe is not fit for purpose. Now, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Labor, they have this document that says that the expert should have higher education and relevant qualifications. And the Ministry of Labor believes that qualifications are defined by the university diploma, and the expert has to be retrained and obtain a different education and obtain a relevant diploma. We have such disciplines, or specialties rather, as well. After the programs were approved, the programs are entered in the classifier. We have forensic doctors and so on. Alexander, I'm sorry. No, I'm not saying that you can go. I just asked you to speak as chairman of the Eurozec committee. Of course, you're speaking about the pains you have, but tell us in a couple of words, what is cooperation all about? Okay, the committee has been in existence for 5 years, and over that time we've done a lot. The results are, well, we've developed a list of expert reviews, program, 2 regulations for interlab tests. Interlab testing is something we've started doing already. Now we're doing the computer forensics. We issue diplomas. Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I'm not finished yet. Just a second. On Tuesday, at the Council of the Minister of Justice, the decision was made to hold the next meeting in Minsk first half of June to decide on international cooperation, because our committee is open for all other members. So, well, the Azerbaijan director is here, and I believe it will be right. We could invite everyone to attend the committee meeting. So everyone's invited. Thank you. Dear colleagues, to conclude our session, let me thank all our speakers for their very interesting, well-prepared presentations, for the enthusiasm you've shown to this forum, and as a gratitude for you to remember this day, please accept these souvenirs from us. And that's the first thing. Second, dear friends, well, we are friends by now, I hope. While scientific progress continues and legal thought develops, forensic knowledge and science will continue, and we will continue discussing the issues in our industry. So I wish all of us to have enough patience to tackle the problems we have, and wish you enjoy the forum. Thank you very much again.